Well, hey, high school, hey, middle school. It's Monday, June the 29th. It's amazing that the month of June is just about done and going to the 4th of July weekend this weekend. And just a couple things. If you're a middle schooler, we got a hangout tonight. We'd love to see you there. Wednesday night, high school, we're back here for worship. And obviously, we'd love to see you there. Registration link is in our bio, so you can let us know you're coming. And we just look forward to seeing both middle school and high school this week. So, hey, as we start this week, I'm reminded as reading through Paul Tripp's devotional this morning that really there are two very contrasting scenes that you see at the beginning of the Bible and at the end. In the beginning, we have Adam and Eve, uh, being in communion and in fellowship with God, and everything is good and everything is right. And then we see what happened with sin. Sin just basically ripped that relationship apart. And instead of them running to the God who had created them, the one who they had fellowship with, the one who they walked with, the one who was there, and the first person that when they would wake up they would see, they ran away. They were ashamed. They were full of guilt. They went into hiding and made clothes out of fig leaves because they were so deeply ashamed of what they had done. And so you have that scene, and then you also have the scene at the end in Revelation of this banquet, this wedding feast that's coming together that you see in Revelation 19. And then in Revelation 19, what you have is all of these gathered not in shame anymore, but in significance. Significant because they have been washed in the blood of the Lamb, that their sin has been forgiven, that they know they can run towards Jesus instead of away from Jesus when they have sinned. And it's a beautiful, beautiful picture. And one of the things I want to read before we kind of expound on this idea, well, like what is it that separates us between the first picture that we see and then this last one. The first picture being full of guilt and shame and running away from God. And what is it that happens between that first picture and the second picture, where all of a sudden these are sinners that are standing at the wedding feast that is happening. So I want to read just to you a little bit out of Revelation 21. I think as we're here in the middle of summer, we don't yet know what school's going to look like. We don't know, all those kind of things. But I think even though we can't really comprehend this, we can, as followers in Jesus, know what Revelation 21. There's some imagery here that we can have hope in. And so John says this as we start chapter 21. He says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. I also saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared like a bride adorned for her husband. And then I heard a loud voice from the throne, 'Look, God's dwelling is with humanity, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God.'" Think about that. Like God is dwelling with us like he did in the beginning. "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Grief, crying, and pain will be no more, because the previous things have passed away." Can you imagine that there's a time where isolation doesn't drive you to tears, where the pain and the hurt of anything that's happened relationally or from depression or whatever that might be is gone. The pain and the scars that occur because you've been betrayed are gone. The pain and the hurt of losing someone close to you, it's gone. And then in verse 5 says, "Then the one seated on the throne said, 'Look, I'm making everything new.'" Ever wanted to start over? Here God's making everything new. "And he also said, 'Write, because these words are faithful and true.' And then he said to me," this is John again, "'It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will freely give to the thirsty from the spring of the water of life. The one who conquers will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But the cowards, faithless, detestable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars. Their share will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. So we know that that kind of literature is apocalyptic, and there's imagery there that isn't necessarily um, true in the sense that that's exactly how it's going to happen. But you get the idea. There'll come a day where God will say enough, and Jesus will usher in this second coming. And when we are with Him, there will be no more death. There'll be no more dying. There'll be no more tears. There'll be no more fear. There'll be no more of these hurts that cause us such deep pain. And so, how do we get there? Because the reality is you and I are caught between the two images, the pictures, the scenes that I described at the beginning. We have the scene at the beginning in the garden that starts out well but ends terribly. And then we have the scene at the end where there's the wedding feast of the Lamb, where God is gathering all of His people. Now, what is it that transforms and changes things between that? And I would submit to you, maybe the most important word in the Bible, other than the name of Jesus, and that word is grace. Because it was grace that allowed God to not only let Adam and Eve live, but to give them purpose and to continue to point to them towards this story that He'd been creating from the beginning, this story of His Son being the Redeemer, being the Messiah, being the one who would make all things new. And so the question that I have for you as we start this week is have you had an invasion of grace in your world? Have you had grace that has come in to totally wreck you in a good way? Have you had grace that's come in to allow you to be able to no longer be ashamed of going to God or fearful, but knowing that in His grace you can come to Him with anything, and He'll be there with waiting arms. So what a thought to think about as you begin a Monday. So hope you have a great week. I invite you just to read Revelation 21 and let that imagery kind of soak over you, and just ask yourself, what is it that changed between the beginning of Genesis and there in the end? And I believe it's grace. And have you responded to that grace, that love, that irresistible love that is passionately pursuing you? So hope you have a great week. Hope to see you, middle school or high school, sometime on campus this week. We'll see you soon.